This week on Forward.
This is a unique chance to actually get a reliable point of view of electoral politics in the United States. And, to your credit, you absolutely gave that to me, and it's in the book.
So, Stephen, if someone were to ask you, hey, what is this book about? What would you say?
I would say it's sort of the most accurate depiction possible of the inside of a campaign during the last American election.
So we were both tracking down some version of the truth and some version of the not so distant future. And I think other people who read this have also gotten the sense it's like they come back and say, I find this eminently plausible,
Right.
which is what makes it scary, but also hopefully valuable. It is my pleasure to welcome back to the podcast the author of The Next Civil War, and more importantly, my collaborator and co-author on the brand new political thriller, The Last Election, Stephen Marche. Welcome, Stephen.
Andrew, how you doing?
Wow. I don't know about you, Stephen, but I am super pumped that this book is actually arriving on bookshelves and in people's hands and getting out into the world. Have you gotten any feedback as yet?
Well, the people who read it really liked it. I mean, the Publishers Weekly, I've never actually had a starred review. I've never had a pre-review for a book go as well as be as nice as that one, where it's like, this is a really great working thriller. So I was pretty stoked by that. And yeah, the response I've had has been great. How about you?
Yeah, same. People read it, and what's funny? I don't know if this is an insult to my previous books, but they were like, "I'm shocked at how much I like this."
Right. Well, I mean, it makes sense because it's like it's a thriller, like it's a straight thriller, but it also contains sort of more intimate information about political life, and I think those two in combination are pretty interesting to read, right? Like I think those are sort of more fun things to read than just like politics, right? Like and it's sort of a different take on it, I think. And it's a very unusual book. Like I looked at it again last night and I was like, we have actually written something that's pretty particular. Like I don't think there's another example of a book really like this one. But I think that's exciting too, right? Like it's strange.
Yeah, what multiple people have said to me is they felt like they learned something and they were entertained, which I feel like is mission accomplished for us. Because,
Exactly. Yeah.
our goal was to entertain, yes, but it was also to convey various messages. So let's talk about who the heck you are, how you came to this topic, how we ended up writing this book together. So you wrote a book, The Next Civil War, that came out, gosh, now about 2 years ago. And it was provocatively meant to say, look, the United States has very, very clear signs of disintegration that other societies have gone through, and it's not exceptional in this regard. What was the process like researching that book and then putting it out? This is a work of nonfiction,
Yeah.
and then the response thereafter.
Well, in some ways, it was similar to our project because it was like there were imagined scenarios of what an American breakdown would look like, and then it was deeply researched, right? So, I mean, what it did was like the research was like a lot of phone calls with experts, and also, we live in an age of sort of unbelievable modeling from a lot of different viewpoints: agricultural, environmental, political, economic. Like there just are these really, really functional models, and I wanted to sort of basically take those models and then put flesh on the bones, right? Like make people understand what it means if a hurricane hits New York, which all the models say that it will, right? And so that was kind of the process there. Then there was, of course, the journalistic process of like going out and talking to members of the extreme right, which was, because I look like one of them, it was very easy for me to, get access to them. And they were all very polite and nice to talk to with me. And so it was talking to them, doing things like going to gun shows in Oklahoma, prepper conventions in Ohio, talking to people of that nature. So it was kind of it was like all methods that I could think of to do. And really, what was so interesting to me about our project is that in that book, I didn't really talk about electoral politics, right? Like I didn't really, because like I felt like the models that I wanted to bring in the next Civil War were ones that I felt I could define. Like some are stronger than others, but I could inform the reader of the strength of them, right? So it's like the environmental models are incredibly strong. They just are incredibly predictably strong. The economic models are incredibly weak. I'll give you the best ones. I'll show you how they work, but like they're not effective. But with electoral politics, I really couldn't get reliable information. Like everyone has an agenda, everyone is hiding something. And that's why when you came along with this idea, I really felt like this is a unique opportunity, right? Like this is a unique chance to actually get a reliable point of view on the state of American of electoral politics in the United States. And you, to your credit, you absolutely gave that to me, and it's in the book.
Yeah. So, what was your experience like promoting the next Civil War, the response thereto? How did that go?
Well, I mean, it was a year after January 6th. It was very much in the air. It was during the Omicron wave, or was it Delta? I forget which one. But, I was just in front of this laptop doing exactly what I'm doing, like 6, 7 hours a day, talking to, various, like whoever would have me, which was a lot of people. And like I think I ended up doing over like 100 podcasts during that period. But it was very much on people's minds. That was and I think going into 2024, of course, it's again very very much on people's minds.
So, Stephen, if someone were to ask you, "Hey, what is this book about?" What would you say?
I would say it's sort of the most accurate depiction possible of the inside of a campaign during the last American election, where American democracy actually collapses under the weight of distrust and under the weight of a collapsing electoral system. And so it's a paranoid political thriller that's accurate.
So I approached you and said, "Hey, how would you like to collaborate on something?" Because I had an instinct, and I think you shared that instinct, that we're trying to get a message out. And stories are the most powerful and effective means of actually getting messages out. For better or for worse, now we're all kind of getting pounded into content.
Yeah.
But then I thought, well, hey, I think we have a compelling story here. I have an insider's perspective on what the heck it means to run for president and what the mechanics would be of a challenge from outside the two-party system. And there
Yeah.
are various folks who see that coming to pass in 2024. I had a feeling that there was going to be something of that sort. So I approached you with the idea saying, look, I'd like to present a, an account of what would happen if there were fairly strong independent challenger for the White House. And by the way, I don't think I'm giving anything away here. Like this candidate, people think it's going to be me. It's loosely.
No. Let's just be clear. It's all a work of
Oh
fiction.
yeah, yeah. So no one's based on anybody. But
Yeah. Right.
I mean, but people could, if they read it, they'd be like, this reminds me of some people.
Yeah.
So there's probably a dash of me thrown in there for fun. But I had a sense as to how that might play out, and I thought, well, we can convey a really true to life insidery account of what would happen from the campaign's perspective.
How close do I was interesting because I was thinking about it today, reading the New York Times, like about there was like this piece about the rise in political violence, like the rise in tolerance for political violence, and also the outside party. Like, how, I'm surprised at how close we're getting. Like, I mean, I thought when you write these things and you're predicting things, like you're almost never right. But I mean, how close do you think I think we're pretty much on track. What we wrote in the book, we're not that far away.
Yeah, I'd say we're within like a 1 to 5 year zone of much of what we write about
Yeah.
coming to pass. So let's walk through your process a little bit and the writing process a little bit. So you and I then sit down for hours and hours and hours, and I give you a whole slew of stories. I give you projections. I give you conversations and whatnot.
Right.
And then you integrated this journalist into the plot. I'd say that the two main characters of the last election, now available for order in bookstores everywhere, are Martha, the journalist, and Mikey, the independent campaign manager.
Right.
Now, I certainly would con to the fact that that I'm the source of a lot of the campaign stuff, but the journalist stuff came primarily from you and your experience. You are a journalist. I mean, you write for the Atlantic and other publications. So what brought Martha to the fore in your mind?
Well, I felt like you were giving me the real technical information about a political campaign. And those details they're really fascinating to me. They never get written about, like how dark money actually works, how the video transfer works between these different entities, how what unloading the book means, how scandal management, or like how opposition research works, how humanization coaches work, like all this stuff, like very frank and accurate information about a political campaign, with warts and all, right? And I thought that was like that's the strength. That's the major strength of this book. Like it's we're writing a political thriller, but that's what's unique about it, is that it has that information in it. And to complement that, like what I thought was like only fair was that if you were going to do that, then I would sort of do what real journalistic practice looks like, right? And what the inside workings of like and this is just like things that I've known from friends, things that I've heard from being in this business for a long time about how these things work and how large institutions work with all their warts and all, right? With all their various bureaucracies and bureaucratic failures. And also, I think one of the things we really wanted in this book was like to show that neither of these people are bad people, but inevitably bad things occur from what they because well they're not they're good people. Like the journalists that I know are not bad people. Like they just aren't. And I think the political campaigners aren't really either, right? And so
Some are, some aren't truly, but a lot
yeah,
of them
of
are. A lot
course.
of them are not. To your point, like a lot of them actually got into it to try and do something good.
Absolutely. And like, oh, and certainly there are bad guys too, right? Like, like this is a thriller. Like we absolutely have that sort of thing. But I just wanted to be accurate. Like, how does the tip line work, right? Like, it's actually quite an elaborate process that determines what stories arrive in a newspaper, right? And in a major newspaper, and these things are of a technical nature, right? They're not necessarily like the choices that people make. It's really the structures that they live in. I mean, I think that's where you and I really were in total agreement, is that what's interesting, what the real crisis that America faces, everyone, it's all personalities and it's all these assaults on people's personalities, and name calling and so on. But the truth is that the problems are structural, right? And the
Yeah.
problems are of a structural nature, and the solutions are going to be structural. And that when you actually just show these systems, which you did and which I did for journalism, you did for political campaign, you see that it's just not functional, right? Like it's not the kind of thing that can work, right? And so that's where Martha came from. Just like a lot of the great female journalists that I've known over the course of my life, who are totally dedicated. It's basically a religion to them. They basically feel that they're in a holy practice when they're practicing journalism, and they're in these bureaucracies which have their ups and downs, and they're trying to navigate through them. And so she was very easy for me to create, right? I mean, I've known women like
You've
Martha
known people that resemble
my
Martha.
whole life, and admired them, right? Like they're
Yeah.
my friends, and like so she was super easy to create.
I am so pumped that The Last Election is coming out September 12th. The political thriller by yours truly and Stephen Marche, the author of The Next Civil War, will be in stores everywhere, but you can buy your copy right now at andrewyang.com. Order now and be the first on the block to know how the next election turns out. It has all the twists and turns. Will it be the last election? Let's hope not. andrewyang.com for The Last Election. Buy it today. Thank you. Love you all. On our side, so the joke in my circle is that Mikey, the campaign manager, is based on Zach, who was my
Yeah.
campaign manager, but he's a lot hornier.
I don't know. Zach married a girl that he met on the campaign trail, didn't he?
Shh. I told a joke about this the other day, Stephen. I was like, it was a very intense environment. We're trying to save the country.
Yeah. Well,
Intense
Zach, I mean,
relationships formed.
Zach told me the truth about how things worked, and it was incredible. I mean, like it was. I mean, for me, it was like, oh wow, like every 15 minutes there was some astonishing fact that I've followed American politics my whole life, but it's like really basic things about how things work. I mean, just it's amazing that they're not known. That they're not like that. This process is so opaque that these basic facts of how these management is done are unknown.
So I'm going to say something that the book doesn't get into as much. Book gets into a lot of things, but one of the things that people don't really appreciate is how the two parties are functioning quite differently in this regard. So the Democratic Party, 69% of Dems have a high trust in the media, and so that they take their voting cues from the media. If you look at the Republican voters, it's down to 15%.
Right.
Which means that if you run as a Republican, you pretty much have to be in opposition to most media. You can see that with Trump and the fake news, and DeSantis with the fake news, and
Yeah.
it's at best you're supposed to have a somewhat adversarial relationship. And I was in many ways an outsider, and I considered myself a relatively positive outsider. But in the Democratic Party, there are a lot of safeguards to keep someone like me from winning. In the Republican Party, those safeguards are much, much weaker to the point where Trump just ran over them in 2016. He may be poised to run over them again in 24. And so you see this growing energy and frustration. I will say that most people are surprised by the way our story goes, like our plot goes.
Right.
And one of the things that you and I said was like, we want everything to be as accurate and true to life as possible.
Yeah.
This isn't going to be some kind of fantasy fulfillment.
Right. Yeah.
To- to-
Well, I mean,
to-
obviously we're not writing a story with a happy ending, right? Like this is not Louise Penny and Hillary Clinton, right? Like, I mean, not to be critical of either of them because I think that book is excellent, but like that's not what we're doing, which is like a fantasy of American political life. Like this is the opposite of that. This is how it
This is the
is.
reality of American
Yeah.
political life. This is like, hey,
Yeah.
how does this stuff actually shake out? And
Yeah.
then, and what are actors' actions and motivations on the inside?
Yeah. I mean, I think that was really crucial to the whole process. And I mean, um, I think in all honesty, I think that took a lot of courage on your part. Like on my part, it really didn't. But like I think for you to actually reveal like how this stuff works, I mean, I guess I betrayed a little bit about the media community, but no one likes them anyway, right? So
Yeah, I did. I mean, I found the details very interesting of what's going on, but it isn't. Um, in a way, it's not news to many
right.
folks that is the way it's going on. So, what was the most enjoyable part of writing this book for you, and then what was one of the less enjoyable parts?
Well, I think the most enjoyable part for sure was talking to your people, right? I mean, that was just like, I mean, that was just a crash course education in American political life. That, I mean, who has that? Like, I mean, that was just an unbelievable gift and just simply on a level of human curiosity to understand how these mechanics work. I mean, I feel like no one other than me has ever gotten something like that. Access journalists work for 20 years to get information that I got the first day because our agreement was I want the truth and then you can cut whatever you want, like, and then we'll work out what happens later. Like that meant that I really got the truth. I mean, and you ended up basically cutting nothing of the truth. I mean, very, very little. Like that was to me was just an unbelievable, unique gift. The hard part, I would say, Well, I mean, I think we had to write it fast, right? Like it's one of those things where it's like it
It's
certainly was
timely.
hard. It's timely. Like it needs to be out. It needs to be like if we didn't publish it this fall, it would be too late, right? And so we needed to go very very hard. And so it was like quite a grind over like a period of 3 or 4 months to get just to get the writing done, right, in some kind of coherent way that we could then work with. um, but it was, I mean, like it was on the other hand, it was certainly never a painful process for me. I mean, I like writing, and I certainly liked learning what I learned. So it was, like it was surprisingly painless. I mean, I've never really collaborated with anyone before, so I don't know. Maybe I should do it more often because I really enjoyed it.
Well, I enjoyed it too, and getting your pages was a blast for me. You would send me a whole chunk of pages, or in some cases chapters. I'd be like, "Ooh, what happens next?" Even though I have a sense, obviously, of where the plot was going to go. And reading through your, in some cases, recreation of scenes that I'd lived was really fun and fascinating. There were some differences, and I got to see the choices you made in terms of what you changed and what you kept and what you turned scenes into, who you turned characters into. A lot of the characters are composites of
Yeah.
real people, which I suppose is very much the norm. And there was a point somewhere in the middle of the book that it felt like a world had been created, where no, when you're watching a TV series or movie, the successful ones at some point make you think that okay, that this feels like a version of the world or another reality or track. That the book achieves that somewhere in the middle, and I remember having that feeling when I was reading the chapters you sent over, and feeling a thrill where I was like, "Wow, we're doing it."
I mean, you do live in a world, right? Like the relationship between you and Zach, and between, I mean, it's all it is this kind of nexus of meanings, right? That, and I wanted to capture that. I also thought the thing that I really liked was, even though it's like obviously it's a dark book, it's a paranoid political thriller, but true.
There's some humor in it. There's some humor, but
There,
it
but
is
also it's
pretty
like,
much like real life. There's some humor in real life, and it's kind of dark.
but then whatever you told me that was optimistic, I believed, right? Like, like it was like I'm trying to get a portrait of like the volunteers and things like that. And Zach and you were both like, oh, those are great people. They're just there for their country. They're like, they work, they do this work for free, and it's and out of love for their country. And like that, I mean, that was another part that, because I was given access to like the darkness, like frank descriptions of dark money, frank descriptions of all this stuff, when the optimism and the patriotism, the genuine, I believed it, right? And I could write it like I believed it, right? Like I could write it like, these people are not lying. These people are, they mean this, right? And I think that was kind of, if there's any hope in it, it's that, right? That
Yeah, it's true.
there's lots of actual patriotism out there, right? And lots of genuine desire to make the world a better place, like tons of it. That's not a lie to say that.
Yeah, I often say that Americans are being let down by our
Yeah.
institutions.
Oh yeah.
Like the people are better than the institutions. At this point, if you were just to line up a bunch of random Americans, they could do a whole lot more.
Yeah. Well, the institutions are really terrible, right? I mean, they are in free fall. And I mean, like, well, I mean, that was the point of the next Civil War, right? Which was like, if you look at these are not really sustainable processes that are going on. But yeah, it's not the people. It's not, I mean, like the people are, I mean, I live in Canada, so a completely different political system, that a pretty functioning political system. The people aren't better, right? Like, it's not like that's not how it is. I know that for a fact, right? It's just the system works, a little better, although hopefully for a little long, it might just be a case of holding on a little longer. But yeah, I mean, I found that like, because I felt like I was getting the real information. What was genuine and beautiful was also, I could write in a really honest way, which I loved.
This podcast is sponsored by Helix Sleep. It's a pretty short list of things you can do that are going to make you happier, healthier, more energetic, more productive every single day. You know what's on that list? Getting the right freaking mattress. And what's the right mattress for you? If you go to Helix Sleep, you take their personalized sleep quiz and they will send you one of 20 unique mattresses made for you and you alone. Well, not you and you alone, like 5% of people. Do the math. For a 100-night free trial, you can sleep on this thing for 3 months. It will keep you cool. Don't just take my word for it. My kids seek out this mattress in the house. It's the #1 rated mattress picked by GQ and Wired magazine. This mattress will actually make you happier, healthier, and more productive. Helix is offering 20% off all mattress orders and 2 free pillows for our listeners. Go to helixsleep.com/yang. This is their best offer yet, and it won't last long. With Helix, better sleep starts now. What is your favorite scene in the book? Because I want people to have a glimpse as to what happens in the book. I'll tell you mine.
Yeah,
Um,
tell me yours.
my favorite scene in the book was the rally. Maybe because it reminded me of some of our real life rallies. But this was a rally in Target Center in Minnesota. And there are all of these things going on behind the scenes, but also in front of the camera. You wrote a version of a rally speech that I quite enjoyed. It felt like a version of something that I might have said.
Right.
So that was my favorite scene. Maybe in part because it brought me back. It made me
Yeah.
feel a certain way, but it also felt very, very real. What was your favorite scene?
Well, I mean, the thing I mean, I like that scene too because I got so many details from so many different parts of your campaign. Like I got like the signs have to be double sided. Like if the signs are only one side, then when the picture comes in, it's like it doesn't work, right? Like you don't see the so like little details like that are just fascinating to me, like how the technical works. I mean, obviously, I liked writing the bad guy. Right. I like those are like the funnest things to write, like Balfour and like, like where he goes and visits the tech overlord and his elaborate, lair basically. Like, I mean, like those and figuring out like how opposition works, how opposition research works and like how, and the methods they use. I mean, it's a cliche, but it's always funner to write the monsters than to write the good guys, right? And I did like that. I mean, I also liked writing like I would say the real details of the like how you go over maps. I mean like the details of like of the deep strategy, which I found like I just find really fascinating. Like it's like how deep this like how you're thinking through like states and things like this and knowing the different electoral college situations in each one and how complicated it is and how there's this huge amount of basic knowledge of these systems that are elaborate to say the least. Like I really enjoyed writing those parts too, just because I don't think that's really understood like in horse race politics, even though it's the key to it all, right? Even though it's like absolutely how it runs. You understand exactly where the two parties hate each other, but where they also are in cahoots, right? Like where they also like shore up their influence together as a way of like excluding, and they hate each other but they sure hate anyone other than them more, right? And that just is a very interesting way to approach the whole electoral system.
Stephen, the last time you were on the podcast, we were talking about AI, which you've done a ton of writing and research in. A lot has happened in AI since then. What is the latest and what is your concern level? And as one example, right now the writers and actors are on strike in part because studios want to use AI to produce content more cheaply and efficiently. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm not worried. As you know from having worked with me about this thing, it's not like I'm the most optimistic person in the world, right? Like we just wrote a book called The Last Election together. But like I don't think that AI is a threat to anything. I mean, what I honestly believe is that the anxieties about AI, in particular, like never mind the monster, like the AI is going to eat the world. Like those fantasies are, simply a distraction from the real monstrosities of the algorithms that social media has already got us in, right? There are way more dangerous things out there than AI. And as someone who, I've collaborated with two things this year. One is you, and the other is AI to write a novel. You are a much better collaborator. Like the idea that AI is going to replace writers is ludicrous. Like it is going to replace some boilerplate writers, but it's not going to replace anyone in Hollywood. It's not going to lower anyone's value. It's just not that kind of system. It can't do what a screenwriter does. And so I think that while there are obviously real concerns about a lot of things, they're mostly concerns in other fields. Like they're mostly concerns about what it might do when it's plugged into social media, or what it might do when it's plugged into the justice system, which it should never be. But in itself, like generative AI I don't think it's a threat to anyone. It's certainly not a threat to writers. As someone who wrote a novel using it and is doing a lot of AI projects that I'm obsessed with creatively, I don't think it's a threat to anyone.
Hey YouTube, glad you're enjoying the podcast. If you really like it, hit subscribe, and then YouTube will notify you every time we have a bang up new guest. Thank you.
I guess I should ask, we talked a bit about how you felt writing the book. Like, I wonder if you feel like how accurate you feel we were in the end. Like, do you feel like I mean, I think I'm pretty amazed at how close we're getting to 2024. Like, as you know, I didn't really want to give it a date because I don't like to pick, I don't like the future, but it just seemed to me like actually it could be 2024.
Oh yeah, I'm also a little surprised by how on the nose we are.
Yeah.
It's so there's a lot of discussion about this no labels unity ticket. It's
Right.
been in the news everywhere. Joe Manchin apparently is telling people that he's going to run for president. By the way, so if you have Joe Manchin and let's say Larry Hogan unity ticket, one of the very angry commentaries is, look, this is going to throw the election to Trump. And I talked to pollsters who are on the inside, and they said, "Yep, that's what it does."
Right.
So, we have a different version of that candidate and campaign. The other major third-party candidate is Cornel West, who's polling at 5 or 6% in polls I've seen. I think that's real. I think the vast majority of that comes from the Democrats. And I think that's going to be more than the margin of victory in a bunch of the swing states that are close. So those two things seem very, very real. Cornel West, in many ways, is more real because he's a declared candidate. He's running as a Green. They have ballot access in most states. That's happening. The no labels thing is still somewhat speculative.
Right.
They only have ballot access in a small handful of states. They don't have a declared candidate. Don't know how real it is. But Cornel West is real. And Cornel West does not strike me as someone who is running so he can bargain down the stretch.
No.
I don't think he gives a shit on that. It's like he would not care about some soft core White House appointment to, whatever,
Yeah.
be the new official pontificator of whatever the heck. Like that. That's not Cornel's agenda. So I think Cornel is 100% real. And no labels is probably 70% real.
Are you thinking that Trump is just a presumptive Republican candidate at this point? I mean, that's how, from the outside, that's certainly how it looks to me, which seems to me really dangerous in a whole other series of ways.
Yeah, I think Trump's the presumptive nominee of the Republican Party. There was a minute when people thought it was going to be DeSantis until he actually arrived. So one of the things that I tried to convey, we tried to convey in this book, I hope it comes across to people. So one of the fascinating elements of what's happening now is that you have these machines coming into gear and trying to destroy each other or win or whatever it is. But you fundamentally can't change the human being at the top of these machines. You can't make Ron DeSantis someone other than Ron DeSantis, and then you stick Ron DeSantis out there, and he's actual Ron DeSantis, and people are like, I don't want this guy. So people are like looking around, being like,
Yeah.
well, that's not going to work. Let's find another person that we can actually make this work around. It's Trump, unless everything were to break right and coalesce around another candidate. I'm going to make a short list of the candidates I think have the highest ceiling
Yeah.
that
Tell
could
me.
potentially rival Trump. I don't think it's DeSantis. I don't see that coming back. I think Tim Scott has a very high ceiling.
Interesting.
Um, I don't think it's Nikki Haley. I don't think it's Pence. The other two who I think have very high ceilings are Vivek Ramaswamy, who has a genuine
Really.
following and genuine appeal, and also can self-fund as a bridge to various levels. I think that there are a lot of people who are looking around DeSantis who Vivek is their second choice. When I say that, I mean among real voters, among actual Republican primary voters. There are a
Right.
lot of Republican primary voters who'd be perfectly happy with Vivek. Uh, so that is right now, I'd say, the dark horse.
It's going to be turmoil, isn't it?
The other outside possibility, as someone who's going to outperform relative to what most people think, is Doug Burgum. In part because Doug Burgum is a self-funder. He's even richer than Vivek. I mean, Vivek's net worth is estimated at 600 million, which is enough where he could, if it got serious, bankroll himself into tens of millions without feeling the pain too much. Doug Burgum is worth low billions, which means he could self-fund into the tens, hundreds of millions of dollars,
Right.
which could be a very useful bridge. Doug Burgum just made the first debates. Most people still have no clue who he is. So if he can supplement his native resources with some genuine popular appeal,
Yeah.
he has more upside. So the problem for a lot of these customary political figures like Pence or Haley or whomever, and I feel their pain in a way, is they're spending, in my opinion, probably the majority of their time fundraising. That
Yeah.
I mean, they're just like the average member of Congress, where someone like Nikki Haley or Mike Pence or Chris Christie or a lot of these other folks, they'll show up in an early state and they'll do a thing, and then they'll disappear to a money center the next day. They'll disappear to the Hamptons, Palm Beach, California, Texas, and just freaking grind and pass the hat. And they need to keep their campaign alive because every 90 days a new report comes out saying, no, Chris Christie raised 1.7 million. Nikki Haley raised, whatever it was. Let's call it 7 million. And if that number starts to lag or fall off the track, then everyone says, "Whoops!" Like, I guess they're not viable. Whereas Vivek and Doug can get away with it to a higher degree and just be like, "I just plugged 25 million in, so campaign's fine."
I remember one of the first times we talked about the book, I was like, okay, let's do like, what are the most important days in a campaign? What are the days that matter? And you were like, first quarterly fundraising report, second quarterly fundraising report, third quarter. That's when I knew we actually had something, right? Because it's like, that's such an unromantic answer. Like, that's such a like, in a sense, a cold-blooded answer, but of course it's true, right? And like and that was what that, like we were able to focus on that, like on that reality of that sort of stuff, and the day, and also the daily grind of like how to fundraise, which is the current American political practice. Like I just found all that stuff just like both chilling but fascinating too, right? Because this is how it actually works. I mean, do you think that that's, I mean, is that the core of the problem, or is that just like one of the many problems?
Well, so one of the things, I can't give things away too much, but there's a sense that it's billionaires running a lot.
Yeah.
You look at someone like J.B. Pritzker, who's the Democratic governor of Illinois, billionaire. One reason why he's mentioned in these lights. And you have these machines that are getting more and more powerful and more expensive. And then if you have like an ordinary human, even if they're the governor of whatever the heck, like run, they're like, oh shit, like I need millions and millions of dollars to feed my machine. Uh,
Right.
and so the average American's looking up saying like, this is terrible. Like what the heck is going on? And so who can override the machine? Uh, oftentimes it takes a billionaire. And then the
Right.
media is complicit in this because the media is like, oh shit, we have to pay attention to this guy because he's a billionaire because he can do it. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if you had like another random person be like, oh, we can ignore this fool. But then if if the person shows up with $1 billion, you're like, oh, I guess we got to pay attention. And so that like the billionaire path is one of the only ways out. And then people hate that because it's like, well, that's super fucked up that you need a billionaire
Well,
who
it's not a
can fund
good
themselves.
system when only billionaires can be in power. Like that's not the American idea. You know what I mean? Like or the Democrat. The thing I also find really fascinating when you explained it to me was how the money matters in itself, but especially in the early days, it's almost symbolic what it means. Like it means a certain kind of it's like if Nikki Haley raises 17 million or something like this, that money is actually not particularly significant in itself so much as it is a demonstration that she can raise it, right? Like
Yes.
that she has that kind of investment, and I thought that was really interesting too.
Yeah, the rule of thumb is that 80% of the campaign's money will get spent in the final several weeks.
Right.
So if you're competent, you're not spending the money. But people have to be able to see that you will have the money and can get the money. And then if you can't, then you're like, well, you're doomed. So there has to be that constant arms race, and and the press will turn on you in an instant if your fundraising falls below a certain level. Now, there were times in the not so distant past where people have overcome that dynamic. John McCain had some terrible fundraising numbers the cycle he went on to win the nomination. Like there were candidates who were left for dead and then came back.
Right.
Um, but I think things might have changed even since 2008 or whatever the cycle,
Right.
um, because because the sums have gotten larger, because the dynamics of the press have changed. Frankly, because what people are saying with their votes has become less important.
Right.
You saw too. I mean, right now they're talking about Iowa, and it used to be that Iowa was somewhat indicative or determinative, or at least a combination of Iowa and New Hampshire
Right.
were determinative. And look at this past cycle as an illustration, but it's been happening more and more. Like Biden did terribly in Iowa and New Hampshire, and then went on to win the nomination. So you're seeing that there are like the machines are getting stronger relative to the people. This podcast is sponsored by ExpressVPN. Using the internet without ExpressVPN is like not paying attention to the safety demonstration on a flight. Most of the time you'll probably be fine. But what if one day that weird yellow mask drops down from overhead and you have no idea what to do? It's better to be safe than sorry. That's why I recommend using ExpressVPN, the network that's used by high-end corporations for their remote workers, so that everything they do is hacker-proof, anonymous, and verified. I like ExpressVPN because it's easy to use, one click and you're done, and you can access content that you might not be able to see otherwise from Europe on Netflix and other providers. Secure your online data today by visiting expressvpn.com/yang. That's expressvpn.com/yang. And you can get an extra 3 months free. expressvpn.com/yang.
I talked a little bit about like what it was like to work with a politician, which is totally unprecedented for me or really anyone that I've known. But I wondered, what did you think like working with a journalist? Like, did you ever feel weird about it?
Oh, I enjoyed collaborating, man. We should do it
Right.
again. If this book does well, hey guys,
Yeah.
everyone go out and buy The Last Election, because then we can write The Last Election 2, which is oxymoronic, but whatever
Or
the
turn it
hell.
into a television show.
Really, The Last Election.
Oh no! Well,
Um,
next one we'll do is the first election of the Second Republic, right? That's what we'll do, right?
yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
That's a good point.
an utopian book, an optimistic book.
Well, I found the process of working with you to be really positive, because uh, you would interview me and Zach and other people, and you had your own research from your previous work. and then you would produce pages, and I would just come around and say, yes, yes, no,
Yeah.
tweak, no, like that wouldn't happen that way. That
Correct.
person wouldn't talk like that necessarily, blah, blah, blah. And you and I seem to just be in search of the closest thing to the truth as possible. And so you would look at it and say, well, like if that's the way it would go down, then like let's write that. There was never any like, no, I really love.
No, yeah, absolutely not. Well, it's also things like, at one point I'm doing the book and you're like, you don't have a security guy in here. Like there needs to be it's like a security guy is a huge part of this whole process. I'm like, right. I mean, it just never even occurred to me. Right. Like there's just a huge amount like that. Right. Where
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like,
So we were both tracking down some version of the truth and some
yeah,
version of the not so distant future.
yeah,
And that's what excited me is that there was a sense, and I think other people who read this have also gotten the sense is like they come back and say, I find this eminently plausible,
right.
which is what makes it scary, but
Yeah.
also hopefully valuable.
Yeah, that's the idea. I mean, that's what. Yeah, and entertaining. I hope.
And entertaining.
But Publishers Weekly thought it was really entertaining. I mean, that was what I was. I assumed we get the credit from like it being truth telling. Like because we worked hard at that. Like I thought we got that. But like the entertaining thing like is a little trickier, and I think we've got that too, which is nice. Which is like it's a good bonus.
Yeah, it is entertaining. Multiple people have said to me it reads like a movie or a TV show, and there are folks in Hollywood who are looking at potentially turning it into a movie or TV show. So this could be coming to screens near people. Hopefully, people will run out and buy the book and enjoy it. And then X months later, if it shows up on your TV screen, you can be like, oh, and you can be in the know and say, oh, that happened. But I will say, I'd be excited about that because the story does read like a thriller, and that's a credit to you, Stephen.
It is. I mean, it's just a straight thriller, right? I mean, I felt like I was really trying to imitate those great thrillers of the '60s, like like the 7 Days of May, Manchurian Candidate. Those are just great books, and like the political thriller as it's come to exist is a little different than those. Like they tend to be a lot longer and a lot more, with a lot more stages and also more lengthily written, like the more voluminously written. But I want it to be concise, Also, like I feel like the sense of relentlessness, like that's like part of the times we live in, right? This feeling of like this relentless march of time, like things speeding up rapidly. And those old books really had that way of building that right into the structure of the story, and like that, and I wanted to get that too because it seems to fit, right? It fits the moment, it fits the story, it fits where we are at.
Well, I'll certainly give you credit for a lot of the structuring. So if people love this book, then they should thank me. If they
Yeah,
don't like this book, they should definitely blame Stephen. Stephen
that's fine
somehow
with me.
fouled up my genius genius experiences. So for people who want to buy The Last Election, you can buy it at bookstores anywhere. There's an audio version. If you buy it through the publisher, then you'll be supporting an independent publisher, and that's dynamite because me and Stephen decided to team up with an indie. This felt like a more appropriate publisher than a big corporate one, given that, in some ways we're talking about kind of like independent politics and whatnot. It seems strange to then turn to the big labels. Stephen, it's been such a pleasure collaborating with you on this. You and I are going to go on tour together to various cities. And if the response is what we hope to be, maybe this will just be the first of many collaborations.
From your mouth to God's ear. Always great to talk to you, Andrew.
Last Election, check it out, be in the know what the heck is going to happen, and maybe how we can change it, because that, I will say, is what motivates me, and I dare say Stephen too.
For sure.